You're listening to the Jam Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guest is Jeremy Pion-Berlin, and we're going to be talking about his documentary entitled Failure to Protect. Welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. This is this documentary is very different than anything else I've seen in the respect that it's a subject that I've not heard much about. And you directed it, you produced it, and you edited it. What attracted you to this subject?
Well, I've been actually involved in this subject most of my life. My mom actually runs one of the oldest nonprofits in this country called Parents Anonymous. And essentially, the organization, what it does is it helps families and especially parents who get wrapped up in the child welfare system, and it helps them sort of navigate the process because most people really don't understand the child welfare system unless they've had contact with it. And so the goal of the organization is essentially to help parents navigate the system and to try to get their kids back and sort of fix the issue at hand, or just navigate, dealing with their social workers, dealing with the judges. And so it's something I've sort of been exposed to my whole life, kind of volunteering and working for, in the summers and stuff like that. But one time I was at Parents Anonymous and I was doing a video for my mom's company, and I was just interviewing parents and having them just tell me their story of how did you get here? How did you lose your kids? And every parent was essentially just telling me the same story, the same injustices, the same, civil rights abuses. And it was just the names were different, the faces were different, but essentially one after the other, it was the same exact story. And I kind of walked out of the office that day and I just had like an epiphany that, I wanted to tell this story of what does it take? Once you've lost your kids to the system, what does it take to get your kids back? How do you prove you're not this monster that the system is paying you as? And so that was the impetus for the film. And that's kind of how I went on my journey to making it.
So the audience knows. Why don't you tell them a little bit about Failure to Protect, what it's about?
Well, the film is about three sets of parents who have all lost their kids. Their kids are all in foster care. And it's about going on a journey with these three sets of parents, five parents in total, to what does it take to get your kids back. So you see these parents go to court, meet with, advocates, meet with their social workers, have visits with their kids. But at the same time, that's intermixed with professionals, judges, attorneys, social workers, child welfare advocates to explain the system of how it works. So it's really a juxtaposition of how the system is supposed to work, and then what are the realities on the ground for these families in day to day, because there's a real dissidence between what's supposed to happen and what's actually happening. So it was important for me to have that emotional side of it, to connect with these families, to feel their problems, but also understand like the greater context for what these problems are, and so the audience could really understand it. And so that was really key in the film. And at the end of the film, some get their kids back and some don't. So that's essentially it in a nutshell.
How did you choose the subjects in this film, the three families?
I chose them. It takes a lot of bravery, first of all, for families to step up and to open themselves up to, being interviewed on camera, especially while they're in the process of trying to get their kids back, because there's a lot of stress, right? A lot of pressure. A lot of people just don't even want to talk to you because they're just so scared, about what might happen or what repercussions might happen. So, I met, Rosa, one of the parents, through an actual Parents Anonymous meeting. And I just found her to be very interesting and heartbreaking as well, her story. And I reached out on different forums, and, there was other parents who I interviewed, tested out, and they didn't work out. So it was kind of a combination of, I wanted the families to each be, unique in their issues, but also have kind of common threads. So it was a balance of, trying to, convince people that, what my objectives were, and that, I was going in it in an honest, open place, but also trying to find the right type of families, and have like nice diversity within the three families I chose.
How did they feel about being filmed and having their story shared?
Um, I mean, I think they're happy. I think they wanted it, because the thing is, the system really puts down parents, and it really doesn't give them a voice. And that was why it was really key for me to tell this film from the parents' perspective. It's not that the kids don't matter. It's not that the other people don't matter in it. It's just that their voices are heard, and parents' voices in this system are squashed and put aside and not listened to. So that was really the key for me, is to tell it from the parents' perspective, so that their voices could be heard. So the parents were quite happy. I mean, it's the process. You got to build trust with people. You got to talk to them a lot. You got to break bread with them, and then you just record it, and people will forget the camera's on. But I think they were happy about it, because they wanted their voices heard. They wanted someone to listen to them, especially in a time when they felt like no one was listening to them.
It's such an, I mean, we hear so much about, children obviously being taken away from their parents because they've been abused, etc.
Mhm.
But we don't hear much about the other side of the
Mhm.
story. And that's why this is
Exactly.
so important to have people discover and hear more about it, because we have these preconceived notions about the parents. And it's interesting. The couple, no, you're gonna have to tell me everybody's names, but
Which couple is the lesbian couple, Anna and Rheta, or is it
no,
Trish and
the
Ernst?
white couple. The
Yeah, Trish and Ernst. And
yeah,
actually, if you don't mind, can I say one point to what you just
yes,
said? Because I think that's really important. Like, all the news media that you've heard in the LA Times, or any other documentaries that have ever been made, they're all essentially the same story you hear. It's all parents, horrible abuse, social workers should have stepped in sooner and did not step in soon enough. Right. And that's essentially the only story you'll ever hear when you hear about child welfare. And I think the reason why you hear that is that's more salacious, that's more, enticing. But the truth is, those cases do exist, but those are like the minority of the cases that exist. The majority of the cases that exist are low income Black and brown families who have no resources, who have made some sort of mistake, but what they need is they need help, they need resources, they need, mental health, they need classes. What they don't need is their kids being stripped away from them, cause them a bunch of trauma, and then maybe 1 to 2 years later down the line you get your kids back. So that was why it was important to tell more of the nuanced, real stories that are happening day to day with people, that I felt was really important for the story to be told. But
I agree. I agree. Definitely agree. And there's a lot, you make that point in the film. There were so many things that were surprising. That the social workers didn't think it was a bad thing to lie. You know,
yeah, no,
let's talk about that. I mean, that was shocking. And not to throw any, the social workers under the bus or anything like that, but it seems to be rather prevalent.
yeah, I mean, the abuses that you find within the social work community is very like analogous to law enforcement, right? And I mean, the reason why the film is called Failure to Protect is because there's a clause in the child welfare system code where essentially is, if a parent fails to protect their child, then you can remove that child. Well, that's kind of a very vague, broad term, right? And that gives social workers a lot of flexibility to remove a child. It's almost like I always compare it to resisting arrest from police. That charge can get slapped on anybody just from moving their shoulder, right? Or something like that. So it's the same thing with the failure to protect term, is it gives them too much power, and their stick isn't a gun. Their stick is the ability to take your kids back, and to hold that over you, unfortunately. And unfortunately, sometimes kids will say things and they might not always be true. Doesn't mean we shouldn't listen to them, but what this film is talking about is we need to listen to everybody in the situation. We need to gather all the facts and make the most intelligent decision possible. And so I think that's really key in the process. And the social workers, unfortunately, sometimes don't really listen to the parents, and they can be kind of combative towards them. And oftentimes the social worker that comes to your door and removes your child, and guess what, you're not going to be very nice to that social worker. I don't know any parent in this world who would be nice to that social worker. Remember, that social worker who comes to your door and removes your child, that's the one who's going to be handling your case for the next year, 2 years, right? And so all those horrible things you said to them, they're a person too. They remember that, and so unfortunately that can get taken out on you. And the sad part about the system is the best odds of you getting your kids back quickly and effectively is whether your social worker likes you or not. And that is not how this system is supposed to work, but that's how it works.
Right. And how they view where you live and how you live, which you presented also in the film. So if your house is in disarray, or just a lot of the things that when you don't have money, it's just
Yeah,
people
exactly.
pile on you, I think, and it's unfortunate, and because our country's getting poorer as we go forward, it seems like, and nobody seems to be able to get out of the hole, and what you brought up in the film is the amount of money that we spend to keep these children in foster care.
Yeah.
And I think this is what you said in the film, is that if we put that money towards the parents and help them,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in whatever ways they need to be helped, if they need to feed their children or get better housing or get
Sure.
the help they need, that's where the money should go to. Because I don't think, yes, are there people that are bad parents? Are there people, who do terrible things to their children? Of course, we do know that. But as you said, it's a smaller percentage than we think. And these other parents, I mean, poor Rosa. I mean, she had no idea. And that's what you hear a lot. A lot,
Yeah, I mean, it's
Go
like
ahead.
you said, the money is such a key factor in this system, because how the money flows is how the system operates. If this $10 billion annually that we spend in the United States on the child welfare system, if that was spent to help families, to help kids, to help parents in tough situations, you would see a completely different system. But unfortunately, this money is spent once you're already in the system. So you're incentivizing these child welfare agencies in counties and states across the country to take more children away, because the fact is, if you cut their population in half this year, they would get half the budget next year. And so that's the issue, is that they're incentivized financially to take kids. They're not incentivized financially to help families. So that's like the real meat of it right there.
It's just so, I mean, absurd. I mean,
Yeah.
it just is. It just doesn't, it boggles your brain, right? And so everything's always about money, no
I
matter even in the child welfare system, it's
Yeah.
about money. Follow the money. I mean, it's so sad and debilitating. These stories were heartbreaking. They really were heartbreaking. So let's talk about each one a little bit. You brought up Rosa. Let's talk about Rosa. I'd like the audience to know a little bit about each one of
Yeah, of
these
course.
families and their situation and what happened and what transpired for them.
Yeah, so Rosa, she's a mother of six, a Latina single mom. And at the time, she had a live-in boyfriend, and Martine was sexually abusing one of her daughters, or two of her daughters, actually, at the time. And unfortunately, she had no idea it was happening. Now, there's obviously people will hear that, and they automatically people cast judgment, right, on someone. They hear that. How could you not know? How
Right.
could you not know this? Da, 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 da. And and then what happens to a lot of these parents is they don't want to believe it's true. It's the initial reaction. People don't understand this. The first reaction is denial, because you're in denial that you could have let this slip. So it's hard for you to even process the information is true. So she was charged with failure to protect. All her kids were removed from the home, put in foster care, and it took her about a year to go through that process. But she, she's very low, on the low income side, struggling to make ends meet throughout the film. The process of the film, then we were filming with her for about 2 years. She had to move about 3 to 4 times. So that was obviously a devastating story. And then we have Anna and Rheta, a biracial lesbian couple. One's African American, one's Latina. Anna, actually, her daughter was murdered, and she adopted her grandson, Najee. And her and Rheta were co-parenting Najee together. And he ran away one day and told the neighbor that his moms were beating him. And so he was removed from the home. And that was about a 3-year process on that litigation. But they, vehemently denied the allegations, and he admitted later that he had lied. But unfortunately, with these situations, sort of once the cat's out of the bag, it doesn't really matter what happens after that. Or, they could find out the information to be false, but once they've started it, they're not going to release it. Even if they realize their information was incorrect or that this person had lied, you think immediately, oh, send the kid home, right? No. Once the wheels of this justice system, this juvenile dependency justice system, which is very different from criminal or civil, start going, you are going to be stuck in that. And I would say it's at a minimum a year. At the minimum a year, your kids will be in the system, and that's going to be quick. And then our third family is Trish and Ernst. They had 3 kids, and one was special needs, Connor, who was nonverbal, so it was even harder on him. But their second eldest daughter had claimed that the mother physically abused him and that the father sexually abused him, or her, excuse me. And so all 3 kids were removed from the home, and they denied it, and the social workers had ignored the psychological reports, the reports from special investigators. When you have sexual abuse, you can't have a normal social worker interview a child about it. You have to have an expert come in and interview them who's especially trained in these things to understand that. Now, we know with sexual abuse, what is it, like 2 to 9% of the time it's incorrect. Essentially 90% of the time, who's ever claiming it, it's correct. But you just have to take all those things into account and really try to do what's best for that family, but not hide information because you don't want that piece of information out there. You got to take in everything and try to make the best decision you can.
Do they, I mean, there's ways of finding out, obviously, if somebody's been sexually abused. That didn't come up in this film, but I would think that would be something they would go do, is to check and see whether it's,
They did check and see, and that was it was a no. It was a no.
It was a no. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe I missed that part then. So
that wasn't in there because that was even more nuanced.
Okay. All right. So I didn't miss it then. And yet that put a great deal of strain on this couple's marriage, because this is what was shocking to me. It was like a quid pro quo. If you admit that you did this, we'll give you back your son. Admit that to something that you did not do, which is on your record, and you lie. Basically lie and say you did it, then we'll give you your son. That was
they will dangle
deplorable.
They will dangle that carrot in front of you, and they will say, just sign this paper, and that's a really hard decision to make, and I get Trish's opinion of like, let's just end this process, let's just end it, you know what I mean? And then where the father, Ernst, is like, well, I don't want to admit to something I didn't do. And so you wear parents down, you wear them down, and you just have to succumb, because the truth of the matter is, when you fight in this system as a parent, you lose. That's it. There's no winning. So like that's why Rosa got her kids back sooner, because she succumbed to it, you know. And the parents that fought, like Anna and Trish and Ernst um and Rheta, or vice versa, you know, they had a much harder time because they fought, they pushed back on that narrative. And when you fight the system, it's much stronger than one family. So unfortunately, they will do that. And I asked the judges, I asked one judge, I don't know, it might have been off camera, but I asked him, I said, these deals that these social workers dangle out in front of parents, you know, saying, if you just admit to it, then we'll give you your kids back. Well, number one, that means they believe that the kid's safe enough to go home with you,
Right.
right?
Right.
So whether they sign it or not, the social worker is already telling you they believe the kid's safe enough. But those deals, the judges aren't privy to. So those are the deals you do outside the courtroom, right? And then you go, and then they just hear that. So the judge is only hearing one slice of the story. He's not hearing that they already said your kid could go home 6 months ago. So what are we even talking about here? You know? But I think that's a way that the system covers its butt. You know what I mean? Oh, they signed this, so then we weren't wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. It was them. So
Mm.
it's kind of just covering your butt kind of stuff.
See, the judges don't hear about these deals that the social workers are
Um,
trying to do.
They do not hear
That's
about those
even
deals.
more amazing. Why? You know, why aren't they hearing about these things?
It's a good question. I mean, they should be privy to all of that.
Right.
Unfortunately, you know, or you know, I asked another judge about like weighing, you know, like do you guys weigh the negative effects of foster care versus, you know, an imperfect home? Because, you know, no one's perfect, no parents are perfect, no home is perfect, but the system is there to prevent abuse and neglect. That's what it's there for. You know what I mean? And if that's not happening, these imperfect things isn't why we spend all this money on this system. And they said, no, we don't weigh the negative effects of foster care, you know, because once you enter foster care, your likelihood of going to jail, getting addicted to drugs, you know, getting into prostitution, all these things skyrocket once you enter foster care. So the statistics of kids in foster care are very abysmal. I don't know what they are, but they are depressingly abysmal.
And
So
yeah, and then you hear about the foster care parents are the ones who are abusing the children, it's like going, I mean, poor Connor. I mean, how many homes was he in? Here's this,
and he's nonverbal.
disabled, mentally disabled child who can't speak. And he was like, what, four different foster homes and
Yeah, four
two
different homes
parents or
getting
something
bounced
like that?
around. And he can't express his wants and needs too. So, but you know, unfortunately, even if you can, that doesn't mean that's going to change your situation. But his was even harder because he couldn't express
It was
those.
heartbreaking and
Yeah.
heartbreaking. And then when he finally did go back with his father picking him up and how he held him and hugged him and and how happy he was to be finally back home, but unfortunately, tragically, and I'm not hopefully I'm not giving any away, it
Okay.
affected their marriage. And
Yeah.
and that's hard. I mean, I can't imagine that stress on a couple.
Yeah, well, because you have the stress of just your normal life, right? Making ends meet, you know, work, life, you know, friendship, family, and you add this huge stressor on it. I mean, it destroys families. And oftentimes the issue is you go through this whole traumatic experience, right? And you get your kids back. Well, then it's going to take you 3, 4, 5 years to undo, to work through that trauma that you've now gone through, because the system perpetrates trauma against kids. Yet, in fact, kids go through trauma within their families, but once they enter the system, they'll go through more trauma. And then if you get them back, then you got to deal with that trauma on top of that one. So it's unfortunately not a good cycle.
Not a good cycle. And you wonder about these children who I don't know, they're lying for whatever reason. And that's kind of highlighted there too. If you don't like your parents when you're a teenager, who does, right? Generally speaking,
Yeah,
if
no
I
one
could
does.
have
No
new
one does.
parents, we might have, traded them
Yeah.
in. But that doesn't mean that this is a good way to do it. And I wonder if those children regret once they're in the system, but it didn't seem like that for some of them, which
I
was,
mean, some of them, it's hard to know. It's hard to know.
yeah.
I think you know, one of my best friends growing up was a foster care kid. Um, and he left at 17 and just emancipated himself because he didn't like it. So I think it really just depends. Like nothing's all black and white. Nothing's all
Right.
like these people are bad and these
Right.
people are good, and these are the lines. It's nothing's like that. Every situation is unique to itself, and every perspective is unique. So that's what needs to be more dealt with, is more care with these things, and more like specificity with who you're matching with, and trying to figure out the right situation. Or the simple thing, what it used to be was just they go live with grandma and grandpa.
Right.
But now the system has made that immensely difficult,
Yeah.
when that used to be very simple. And now that's very difficult to even do.
Well, Jeremy, where can people see Failure to Protect?
Well, it will be available on Amazon and on-demand platforms on October 17th. You can rent or purchase it. So it will be digitally available and be coming to more platforms later down the line, but it will be available on those. So please check it out.
Yes, it's a very impactful documentary, and one I think everybody should see because it definitely opens your eyes to, once again, the system. So anyhow, and how we can protect our children. So thank you, Jeremy, for being on the show, and thank you for doing this wonderful documentary.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, you too.